Once again, this week's Parsha is Parshat Shemini. Let's start all over again. The 8th day, 7 days, the first 7 days, Moshe was basically erecting the tabernacle, putting on the clothes of the priest, showing them how the service is done, dismantling the tabernacle. 1, 2, 3, 7 days. Everybody's very anxious, you understand, because according to most of the commentaries, the whole issue, the whole concept of this tabernacle was in atonement for the sin of the golden calf. The relationship was broken. I think we discussed this last time, the broken heart. And here is the mending of the broken heart. Here's the relationship that they're looking forward to and so much anticipating between them and God as they once had, or even closer. So here they are in great anticipation, right? They see sacrifices offered, but they don't really see it, right? So on the 8th day, he calls Moshe. Moshe calls Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he tells them, you got to offer certain sacrifices for yourself. A calf, one of them, because of the golden calf. You got to offer some sacrifices on behalf of the Jewish people. And today is the day where the fire is going to come down. Now, don't forget, we explained before, what is this whole tabernacle, this Mishkan that they'd built in the desert? So I call it is the portable permanent Mount Sinai experience. P, right? M-S-E. Okay? The portable permanent Mount Sinai experience. Okay? Because some people just, we're not leaving the mountain, man. Right? They wouldn't leave the mountain for anything, man. The mountain is where it's at. So, no, we got to go to Israel. There's a plan. And some, of course, commentaries say it was as a result of the sin of the golden calf. So here's Aaron, and he's very reluctant. He knows that he was involved in the sin of the golden calf. But he's going to do what Moshe says to do. And they're going to go ahead and he's going to go through. He offers these sacrifices on behalf of himself. He offers sacrifices on behalf of the Jewish people. Interesting thing is to take a he-goat for a sin offering. Actually, according to the Midrash, brings that this was an atonement for the sin of the selling of Joseph. Very key thing that a person has to always take note of. The sin of selling of Joseph is something that we're still paying for to this day, as it's kind of obvious, as brother goes against brother. So here comes the day, they sacrifice it, right? He carries when this thing which God has told you, it says in verse 6, when this thing which God has told you to carry out is done, then the glory of God will appear to you. So Moshe said to Aaron, approach. He was reluctant to approach. He didn't want to. He was involved in the sin of the golden calf. Approach the altar, carry out your sin offering, your burnt offering. So he did every single thing, right? And then it goes on, where finally, after he had offered all of these sacrifices, in verse 22 it says, Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and he blessed them. He then came down from where he had made the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. Moshe and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. Why did they all of a sudden go into the tent of meeting, right? Well, it says here in this commentary, Moshe taught Aaron how to offer the incense. Then they came out, blessed the people again, and the glory of God appeared to all the people. And verse 24 finally says this, fire came out from before God and consumed the burnt offering and the fats upon the altar. All the people saw, they sang praises and fell upon their faces. Here was the day. We worked so hard, everybody donating. We gave all the boards, the beams, the gold, the silver, the jewels. We erected this machine that was going to be the carrier of the divine presence, that Mount Sinai experience you could go to and plug in and see and have your experience with God. So, but it wasn't going to work unless a fire came down. Then that was the sign. So here you got to crank the machine. You ever tried a lawnmower? First time, 7 times. They're going, Moses, 7 times you're pulling, right? Finally, the 8th day, the fire comes down and everybody is just like, woo! We got it. We got it. It's an unbelievable day. We got our relationship. God is pleased with us. We are in. What an unbelievable day. The wedding day. where we are married to God better than it has ever been. An unbelievable, jubilous experience for the entire Jewish people. The machine works, okay? But then what happens, as we know, I don't think there's ever been a good day in creation. Really, think about it. Has there ever really been a really good day? Or maybe we have good days, okay? But if you look in terms of the Chumash, and you go in terms of the Bible, no day has ever been a real good day. Could you believe it? I mean, here's Adam in the Garden of Eden. What could go wrong? No, he messes up, right? What could go wrong, right? So here's the thing, you know. Here comes the two sons of Aaron. As we know, Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron. What does it say in chapter 10 here? I believe it's chapter 10, verse 1. Each of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, took his own fire pan. They put fire in them and placed incense on top, and they brought an extraneous fire before God. This is the translation that I have. You might have a different, strange fire, which he had not commanded them to bring. So here comes Nadav and Avihu. Who are those guys? Right? We know that they're two sons of Aaron. And then a fire came out from before God and consumed them, and they died before God. Here are two beloved people. Everybody loves these guys. Everybody. They're the sharpest, they're holy, unbelievable. And here on this such an unbelievable happy day, when just everything seems to be going right, the machine works, we're connected, comes Nadav and Avihu and brings a strange fire. And then they die. And that's just an unbelievable blast. Here's Aaron. He's like, what is going on? What happened? So Moshe says to Aaron in verse 3, when God said, I will be sanctified through those whom I have chosen, and I will be glorified before all the people. This event is what he was talking about, what God was talking about, and then Aaron was silent. In other words, Moshe heard on how Har Sinai he got a prophecy. He says there's going to be a sanctification. There's going to be some souls are going to go up on that special day. Didn't say who. It's going to be unbelievable sanctification. Moshe thought it was him. Maybe Aaron. But when he saw what happened with Nadav and Avihu, his basic comment was, they were holier than us because they went up. God took them. I knew that God was going to take two. But I didn't know I thought it was going to be you and me, not them. Therefore, he was really telling Aaron, why was Aaron silent? And it was an unbelievable thing because he was silent, right? He got an unbelievable reward because he was quiet. He was quiet on the inside. It's because they were holier than us, and that quieted Aaron. They were unbelievable holy people. So now, here's this day, which is like the day of creation. It's like the first day of creation. As a matter of fact, it happened on a Sunday, which is the day of creation. Just like you have in creation, you have day 1, day 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? You have unbelievable 10 things the Midrash lists, things that happened that day. Besides the heavenly fire, the Shekhinah came down. They started to do the blessing of the Kohanim, right? All of these different things happened on that day. Nisan became the first of all the limbs. But the strangest thing that happened is, it says quite simply what they did. They brought a strange fire. First of all, you have to ask, where were they coming from, right? Why did they do this? Does anybody ever think? Did anybody hear anything? What were they thinking? I mean, what was going on? What was a hot dog in it? What was going on? Well, hello, Where were they coming from? Did anybody ever hear anything about it? Okay. The other strange thing is, there is a list I have here, 8, besides the strange fire, 8 different things that the wise men bring down that we have in our tradition what their sin was. That's not the strange fire. It's not related to the strange fire. 8 different things. I'll tell them to you right now. 1, Rashi, the 11th century commentator, brings down, they did something that we're not supposed to do. They went ahead and rendered a decision of law, of Jewish law, on their own without asking their rabbi, who was right there. They could have gone and asked him, and they didn't. They decided they're going to do this. They made a decision on their own, we're going to do this. So our wise men say, because they rendered a decision without asking their rabbi, death penalty. That was one reason, okay? Why so serious, okay? So another thing was, actually, if you look earlier in Vayikra, the very first chapter in Leviticus, right? Number 7, it says quite simply, it says here in verse 7, the descendants of Aaron the priest should place fire on the altar. They were coming from a verse that was told to them by Moses. We got a verse. We got to place fire on the altar. So what was wrong with that? There's a verse that said it. It's where they were coming from, right? So basically that's the same kind of reasoning, But it didn't say when to bring that fire. Were you supposed to wait until a fire from heaven came down and then bring the fire? Or were you supposed to bring the fire before? After or before? Before or after? When do you bring the fire? They didn't ask. They went and did it. Another comment, very strange, they drank wine. And then they entered. How do we know that? Because it says in the later chapter right there that God told Aaron, no drinking wine before you go ahead and do your service. Cohen is still to this day, the halacha is, on holidays, we have the raising of our hands and we bless the people. If you go to a Sephardic synagogue, it's every day, even here. And so we bless, and if we drank any alcohol, right, definitely if you drank a cup of wine, you're not allowed to go up, even to this day. And that's the reason why you'll see even in the Sephardic synagogue in the afternoon, there is no raising of the hands in the service that they do. It's because in case the Cohen drank wine, no one's going to do it. So we're not doing it in the afternoon. In the morning, we know that nobody started drinking in the morning. I don't know. They assume, bad move, they assume that a Cohen didn't drink in the morning, and then so therefore they'll do it in the morning, but they won't do it in the afternoon. They won't even do it at Musaf, which is another additional service later on Sabbath. They'll do it then because they hope that the Cohen didn't go out and partake. So they says they drank wine. Okay, another one was they didn't wear the me'il. This is a certain priestly garment. Actually, it's the priestly garment that has the bells on it. It's like an unbelievable garment. It teaches a whole lesson there, just a whole lesson in itself. Each garment from the 8 priestly garments teaches a whole different lesson in morality. The mantle is the fame. The me'il is my favorite. Why? Because it has bells on it, and it says there, because you can't come in, to the sanctuary, unannounced. God knows where you are. Well, you need to go, woo, I'm coming in. Well, really, it's to teach humanity that even in your own house, you knock before you come in. Don't startle anybody, okay? Even in your own house. Yeah. Derech Eretz, what we call manners. Manners. Anyways, they weren't wearing this garment. Okay, what gives there? Why not? What was the problem with not wearing that garment? Another one is they didn't wash their hands and feet. Before, as we know that a priest, even before we give the blessing of the Kohanim, we have to wash our hands. And in the temple time, they had a special laver that washed their hands and feet. Another one was that they were unmarried. They didn't want to get married. Right? Another one was they didn't have sons. They didn't want children. Right? And then there was another one which was kind of like what I told you. They brought the fire too early. They were supposed to wait till the fire came. Well, actually, I think they were supposed to wait until I don't know, were they supposed to bring it before or after? Okay, I have here written in my notes, they brought the fire too early. But in any case, there are many reasons we see here. Drinking wine, just for, not asking the Rebbe, what's with that? Why isn't the simple usage of the words that they brought a strange fire? They brought an outside fire. Why do they have to come up with all of these different reasons? They weren't married, no children. What was all this? So there's a couple of explanations to this. One was an amazing thing I read in the Leshem, who was a Kabbalist at the turn of the century. He wrote that in history, and we've seen it, there are many times where there are certain people, key people, who wanted to speed the end of days. They wanted to bring the Mashiach. They wanted to bring the Messiah. They wanted to eradicate all evil and bring a rectification for the entire world. They pushed the moment. Actually, that's the language that is brought down. They pushed the hour. So, through history, I would think that Nadav and Avihu were the first ones to try to push the hour. What do you mean by pushing the hour? What are they trying to do? Well, if you look at it in a way, all of these reasons string together to that one reason of pushing the hour, of trying to bring the redemption before its time. And that is what? One, drinking wine. Kind of obvious. Actually, we have in our tradition, there are 4 opinions what was the tree of knowledge of good and evil that Adam and Eve ate in the Garden of Eden. One was the wheat. Okay? One was the grape. One was the fig. And one was the etrog. The etrog is what we shake on Sukkot. 4 different opinions. Wine is a classic. Because as you see throughout history, everybody's trying to do something with wine. Noah, when he comes out of the ark, he tries to plant wine. What's his niche with this? What's his deal with this, right? Why was he trying to, because he wants to rectify that tree. He wants to rectify that fruit. It's all about fixing that fruit, okay? So here's Nadav and Avihu. They drank wine in order to what? To bring that element of the tree of knowledge of good and evil to the holy spot, to the holy place, to the place where you can drink in holiness, right? They were trying to fix the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So therefore they drank wine, became intoxicated, and entered to bring the strange fire, okay? One opinion is that strange fire was actually, yes, even though they were so holy, they're so holy we can't even speak really how holy they were. They were unbelievably way beyond anything that we can comprehend. But even those, them on their level had certain kinds of flaws that they wanted to bring in, that strange fire outside. They're bringing it from outside into the holies. In other words, they're trying to bring an element of evil or uncleanliness. Just like it's a germ will attack a cell. How does germs or an infection attack? It surrounds the cell. It's outside. Only when it finds a weak spot does it get inside and invade. So it's always, we look at the peripheral or the klipa or the outside, the husks, the dark forces are always outside. So here they were trying to bring the element of schmutz, of dirt, spiritual dirt, outside in order to rectify creation, to bring creation to its final redemption. Okay? Assuming authority, right? Also, which is a huge thing. Okay? Now, they knew that they were greater than Moses and Aaron. They were greater than Moses and Aaron. But there's a big thing that they were trying to fix in creation that was way ahead, that wasn't part of the program. They fell out of the program. The program of creation is, does anybody know what the first letter of the Torah begins with? A bet. Bet. Bet, the numerical value of bet is 2. Bet. Even the letter itself has two horizontal lines. The bet of Breshit is going from absolute unity into a concept called duality. The whole creation has this duality concept in it. What is this duality concept? The duality concept is basically that there is something called a mashpia in Hebrew. We call it, it's someone who bestows, And then there's a nishpa, someone who receives. There's a giver, there's a receiver. There's a rabbi, and there's a student. Right? There's a parent, there's a child, right? There's a husband, there's a wife. There's a giver, there's a receiver. Okay? That's built in to creation. Nadav and Avihu were seeking to change the program. Don't alter the program. They alter the program because they say, we know it. We got it. We're just as good as them. We're higher than them. We don't need to ask Moses. We don't need to ask him. We'll just bring the fire ourselves. And therefore, they're going to alter the whole program of creation of, there's a rabbi. There's a rabbi to ask. By the way, it still isn't applicable these days. If my rabbi was in town and somebody asked me a question of law, I'm not allowed to answer. We don't answer. So many times in my yeshiva, I would ask somebody, one of the students, a simple law, and he goes, go to the office, man. They won't answer. Not supposed to. Not supposed to say. Not supposed to render a decision. Shmuel Navi also did that with his Rebbe, Shmuel the prophet. He also did that, and he almost was going to die. If Hannah, his mom, didn't intercede on his behalf, he was going to die as well, because he rendered a decision of law when his Rebbe, Eli, was there. Okay? So here they were trying to alter the course of creation and bring the end of days. Okay? Unmarried, right? The same thing. Also, not wearing the me'il also has to do with not wearing the garment, also has to do a lot with the fact that it was an element of Adam in the Garden of Eden not having any clothes on him. I didn't want to get completely, naked up there, right? And what is that? What are they doing, right? But it was an element of that Adam Arishon, that Adam in the Garden of Eden rectification kind of thing. Trying to be Adam, bringing in the strange fire and fixing the elements of all evil. There were other people also who tried to fix creation and tried to bring it to its end, which was King Solomon. People will say, well, what's with King Solomon? Guess, who knows? If I can say King Solomon, what do you think of right away? What? Give me the number. 1,000 wives. You know how many credit cards that is? Kind of shopping malls you have to create? 1,000 wives. What's the deal with that? He's just into women? The point is, he was trying to rectify evil. He was trying to bring the creation to its completed state by incorporating all of the women, which is the feminine aspect, and rectifying it and bringing it into holiness. Didn't work, okay? There was another case where people tried to force the redemption. I mean, if you come out with just anything, don't try to force the redemption, and we're going to get to it. There were 4 huge sages who decided to do a meditative experience and go into the Pardes. Pardes is the different levels of interpretation of the 5 books of Moses. As we know, the 5 books of Moses, you can read it on an external level. That's called simply understanding the text. And then there's different levels. Actually, we have 4 in general. Each one actually corresponds to the name of Pardes, or paradise is probably what they have extrapolated from what we call Pardes, or literally means orchard. But it really is Parshat, Remez, Durush, and So. These are the 4 letters that these 4 interpretations begin with. Simple, Durush is the homiletics, right? Remez is hints, homiletics, and secret. There are many different levels, but basically 4 different levels. There are 4 rabbis who did this unbelievable meditation. Rabbi Akiva, Elisha ben Abuya, Ben Azai, and Ben Zoma. These 4 rabbis decided to do this. What was their point? Once again, we're going to force the redemption. We're going to bring the Messiah now. But what happened? Right? Only one came out unscathed. Only Rabbi Akiva came out unharmed. Right? Elisha ben Abuya came out. He became a heretic very fast. Ben Azai became crazy. I think, no, Ben Azai saw the light and got zzz. He went just into the light and died. You know, it's so beautiful. And then Ben Zoma became crazy. Only Rabbi Akiva came out and he was still balanced. And the reason why that was a different reason that the Leshem brings down was because to fix that, to do that kind of rectification is a one-man job. 4 men can't go through the vortex. It has to be a one man. We wait for Mashiach, you know, but the bottom line is it can't be, the redemption cannot be forced. But here we get into something really interesting that is dynamic. A couple of things, okay? One is, okay, it's an interesting thing is given that they were so much greater, if it's fantastic if they were greater, if they were actually greater than Moshe and Aaron, right? And they sinned by doing this, so it didn't make them so great in the end. Wouldn't you figure? Right? If they're greater, well, wait a minute. If you're so great, then how come you did such a thing? Right? So here's the idea here, and something that we all have to really incorporate in our lives. And you have to always go into what is the purpose of the Torah. Bottom line, if I could tell you on one foot, as we do know, loving your neighbor as yourself, yes, okay? But there's the deeper whole goal of the Torah is called in Hebrew devekut. Devekut means attachment, meaning connected. We are creations, there is a creator, and our goal is to attach, to be connected to God all the time. God wants nothing more. Our soul wants nothing more, to be attached to the divine all the time. And that is the goal of the Torah. All of the mitzvahs of the Torah are only advice. Actually, the Zohar, the language of the Zohar for mitzvahs is eitzot, which means advice. Itim, which means advice. Advice. How to get to that connectedness. That's the whole thing. The whole thing. And it says, it brings it down later on. You'll see in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Devarim. What does God want you to do? L'davek bo, to attach yourself to Him. You've got to be attached. Everything is about that. The question is, how do you do it? How do we attach ourselves? Right? So they ask that in the Talmud. And they say one of the ways to attach yourselves is you have to attach yourself to the Chachamim, to the wise men. You have to attach yourself to a wise man or a group of wise men. Those people. In other words, if I'm having so trouble being connected, you know, sometimes my life is so crazy, I think I'm running around from errand to errand like with a chicken without my head on. I got to go here, I got to go there, I got to go there. It's very hard to be attached, right? But if I can lower myself, that's a big thing, right? It's actually used in the form of hitbatlut, which is like I can nullify myself to the wise men, to those who are connected to the Torah. In that element, I become attached through connecting to the tzaddikim. The tzaddikim are the righteous. By connecting to the righteous, I therefore become attached. In other words, it works like what I was telling you before. There's a bestower and there's a receiver. There's a rabbi, there's a student. That's how it works. If a person, even though you're smarter than the rabbi, and you probably think that you're smarter, and you probably know that you're smarter than the rabbi, right? Yeah. Oh man, you should see the evil inclination comes right in your brain and goes, well, he didn't know that. Well, I knew that, right? It comes right in. Even though you think you're smarter, I'm going to just nullify my will, and I'm going to listen to what he says. What happens when we do that? Because that's what's Nadav and Avihu's problem. They disconnected themselves from the tree. You don't disconnect yourself from the tree. You see, the way that it works is, the Torah is a book. Yes, it's a book. It's 5 books of Moses. It's a holy scroll. It's fantastic. The way that we look at a scholar, a person who's learned, is we look at him as a living Sefer Torah. He is a living tree. And by connecting to him and connecting to his advice and the advice that he gives, we thereupon gain something called a shmirah. We gain a level of protection, interestingly enough. Because the real question is, I don't understand, if they offered a strange fire, the verse says strange fire, why is there this huge list of other things? They drank wine and no kids, right? Why did they have It's because once they made a decision to disattach themselves from the Rebbe, from Moses, thinking they were smarter, they lost their protection. Once they lost their protection, so they were vulnerable to all of the elements of the drinking of wine and whatever it is that caused them to fall. And that's why there's this whole list. They weren't married, because they were detached. If they would have asked Moshe, didn't it say in the verse to bring a fire from outside? And Moshe would have said, yeah. And they would have done it, everything would have been good. It would have been great. They didn't ask the Rebbe. They disattached themselves. And when you disattach yourselves, so a person loses his neshama, right? He loses his connection to holiness, which comes from the way that creation is made, which is rabbi to student, okay? Now we're going to get to something a little bit different, okay? And this comes from the Holy Master, Rabbi Nachman, and it's so unbelievable. You know, he brings down, there's a verse in Ezekiel, which it says, El asher yesh shama haruach lalechet yelechu, wherever the ruach was to go, they went, okay? Ruach, something about, sometimes, wherever the ruach, wherever the wind takes a person, he just goes wherever the wind goes, right? Not necessarily a good thing. So there's an unbelievable deep teaching we have from the Zohar. And it talks about the heart and it talks about the lungs. So it says, all of the heart's arteries are governed by the ruach. Really, it's not just, the heart's arteries are governed by the ruach of the lungs. What does that mean? We have a verse that says, El asher yiyeh haruach lalechet dahayenu haruach hayotzei mikanfei hareah. Somehow the lungs have what's called wings, or lobes. Maybe it's the lobes, I don't know. The Tikkunei Zohar brings that there are 5 lobes to the heart. I don't know if that's medically or something, 5 parts. Because those 5 lobes or wings of the lungs, 5 wings of the lungs, relate to the 5 books of Moses. We're going to find out what that means in a minute. But he says here, the Zohar says this unbelievable statement here, that if it would not be for the wings of the lungs that blow on the heart would burn the entire body. Again, the lungs are the cooling system for the heart. That if it wouldn't be for the lungs blowing wind on the heart would burn the entire body. I don't know if that's true, in science-wise.
I've seen people that when they have panic attacks, they breathe deeply, and that helps them control the heart. Interesting.
So there's a lot. So we're going to take this to a whole nother level, just this one little simple rule here. Okay? So it says ruach now has 2 kinds of properties, ruach, in terms of its relationship to a candle. Let's look at it as a candle. Candle is neshama. Ner Hashem nishmat adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. Ruach, though, just look at it just to observe, right, existentially, that ruach extinguishes and it lights a candle. As observed empirically, at times the blowing of a ruach will easily, as we see, will knock out a flame. But there's other times where an extinguished candle is lit by a ruach by blowing on it. You can see it with a coal easily, but here he explains it on a different kind of level. A candle is extinguished usually when ash covers the candle. He calls it ash, but it could be like pieces of dirt. where they cover the candle and they don't allow this candle, this flame, to burn in its normal way. All right? So what happens is, the flame, sometimes if it's the right amount of air, of wind that blows on the candle, so it blows away these elements of ash, dirt, or dust that now allows the flame to join as one, that the parts of the flame which were becoming separate now are able to come one and burn. Okay? Therefore, when we blow on a candle, the Ruach blows away the ash from it, and the components of fire reunite and rebind, and they begin to burn. Similarly, occasionally one extinguishes a candle with Ruach, which blows and separates the fire from the candle. Now, what does this have to do with what we're talking about? Now, the leaders of the generation are the concept of Ruach, the tzaddikim, the holy saints. They are called the concept of Ruach, which means spirit. Ruach means wind. They are the concept of wind. Because we know it actually from the book of Numbers, where Moses was told, who is he going to pick to be the successor? He picks Yeshua because Ish Asher Ruach Bo, because he's got the spirit, right? Which is the Ruach, which means wind. He's got the right wind. What does that mean? He's got the right wind. Okay? He knows how to deal with the Ruach of each individual. In other words, his spirit can go ahead and relate to each individual in order to know each individual where it needs to blow and where it needs to be cooled. Okay? Because some people, their fire starts to burn inside of him. They become so impassioned, right? They become so ignited, right? You need to cool down, right? They get so inspired. Sometimes you can get too inspired, right? Sometimes I've seen a lot of people get so inspired, they inspire themselves right out of Judaism, okay? Right out of everything, right? They go, some people though, some rabbis, they don't, not everybody knows how to blow the fire right. Sometimes they blow the fire a little bit too much. Sometimes the rabbis, and they knock out the flame. You need to have somebody who actually knows how to deal with the right flame, the right person, what exactly is needed, how much wind and the type of wind. Interestingly enough, he says here, Israel is called synonymous with the heart, for the Jews are the heart of the entire world. Interestingly enough, is speaking about what you was talking about in terms of stress. Let's say if there's a stressful situation in the world, let's say even in the community, in the Jewish community, there's something heavy goes on, right? Clinton gets elected. I could say that in Texas, I hope. So instantly what happens? Usually, let's go back to the stressor situation. I'm sorry to bring this to the wrong area. Wrong door, Rabbi. Person goes under stress, what happens? The heart starts to beat, right? What happens? The blood is all rushing through the heart. The same way Rabbi Nachman brings down in a stressful situation in the community, everybody runs to the heart. Really, they'll run to the rabbi, the leader of the generation. What's happening? What should I do? What should we do? So therefore, naturally, here's the leader or the rabbi has to deal with the people. It's a stressful situation. So very much the same, you need a wind to go ahead and be able to deal with everybody's heart and to cool the situation down. So in any case, the leaders of the generation must blow their ruach on every person in the right way. They have to blow away from them what's called the ash. And here, Rabbi Nachman explains something so deep. The depression that overcomes them and prevents them, right? And prevents a Jew who conceptually is the heart from burning and being inflamed for God. In other words, Rabbi Nachman does say, and here is an allusion, that the end disease of the later generations before the Mashiach comes will be depression. That's why he says you got to be happy and you got to work on happiness and you got to master happiness. But so here he brings quite emphatically, quite clearly that the issue of the Jewish heart that doesn't burn is because there's a level of an element of depression, the ash in the heart, in the flame that needs to be blown away. in order to get that flame going. There are also wicked individuals who conceptually, they're the mixed multitude. When they assail the heart, Israel, which is like what happens also. If the world gets into, the world gets in, let's look at now I can go globally. The world freaks out, something bad happens in the world, right? So they go to the Jews, right? Usually it's their fault, right? Because they got to blame them, right? Got to figure out something, right? They go to the heart. Something happens in the world, they go to the heart. We're told in tradition that in the end of days, before Mashiach comes, the rulership just before will be what's called the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav are called the mixed multitude, descendants of the mixed multitude. So in any case, the reason is this is the reason the leaders of the generation have to blow away the ash from the heart. They have to blow it away so that the components of fire in each Jew reunite, and Israel unites and becomes the concept of the heart. They have to be the heart. Each Jew becomes the heart for that place which needs the concept of heart, as he again becomes fired up for God and he becomes inspired. Okay? Now, however, at those times, when there's a storm wind blows. In other words, sometimes there's a wind that blows that's not so good. It causes the fire to burn out of control. So similarly, there are times when a storm wind blows inside a person and causes him to burn out of control. And this is what happened with Nadav and Avihu. Okay? Nadav and Avihu became radically inspired beyond. They were on fire. Right? And this is the concept of destruction. Okay? As the sages teach, do not inquire into that which is too wondrous for you. In other words, sometimes a person could become so inspired and they want to look into this text or this esoteric text. And sometimes you got to go things on a level. When you grow spiritually, you got to start with the 5 books of Moses, start with basic laws. You can't jump to what's called the Zohar, which is the esoteric commentary of the 5 books of Moses. You can't jump levels. You have levels. You're inspired, that's great. But sometimes you got to bridle your level. I've seen many people who go into the study of Kabbalah a day after they're in a yeshiva and then they go crazy. Okay? I've seen it spinning out of control. Okay? So therefore, when a person sees that he's excessively passionate, beyond measure, so he knows that this stems from the concept of the storm wind. Sometimes you become too impassioned. Sometimes not impassioned enough. So a person really knows, and you have the tzaddik, the righteous person inside all of you, has to know where his flame is. Where's your flame? You got to wake up in the morning and go, how's my flame? Right? And sometimes the flame ain't going, need to blow on it a little bit. Sometimes the flame might be too big. You got to watch out. Okay? Elijah the prophet was able to subdue this passion. Because here it says, he was a person who was able to ride on the horses of fire in the storm wind. Okay, as we know that Elijah the prophet didn't die, right? He went up, right? This world couldn't contain him. He was just so not into this world. He couldn't even be buried in this world, okay? Because he was so disattached from this world, okay? And this is why he's called a man who rode fiery horses into a storm wind. He would ride and tame the fiery horses in a storm wind, the passion burning out of control as a result of the storm wind. Eliyahu would ride this and tame it, for the Ruach has to blow with control so that the heart's passion ignites within a measure in a balanced manner. Now, the interesting thing that comes about is that Nadav and Avihu, as we know, that they were out of control, right? And you have to learn this. It's apropos to learn this, okay? You always have to have a connection with the Rebbe. You have to have a connection to somebody to help you, to guide you along the way. And sometimes even though that you might think that you're smarter than him, you still have to nullify yourself and nullify your will. But the interesting thing is we know that Nadav and Avihu died. Now we have taught in the Holy Zohar, unbelievable teaching, that later on we have a caption which speaks about a person by the name of Pinchas. Have you ever heard of him before? Pinchas. What happened with Pinchas? He wasn't a Cohen. For some reason, in the loophole of the law, he fell out. He didn't become a Cohen until a certain day where he did something. Right? As we know that there was an old issue there with Zimri, who was the head of the tribe of Shimon. And, there was a time where there was a certain shopping mall, and there were some women in the shopping mall, and he took, he took a new girlfriend home, right, into the camp, right, in front of everybody, and says, Moses, you have a girlfriend from outside. Why can't I bring a girlfriend from outside, right? And so we know Pinchas came, and he basically shish kebabbed him, right? And he stopped the plague. There was a plague, and he stopped the plague. We're taught in tradition from the Holy Zohar, when he did that act, the spirit of Nadav and Avihu, these two holy sons of Aaron, became reincarnated into Pinchas. We also know that Pinchas is Eliyahu, is Elijah the prophet. Pinchas lived a long time. He did, though, pass. And he did come back as Elijah the prophet. But the interesting thing is, how does it swoop around? Interestingly enough, is that here comes Pinchas, and he sees this act, and what does he do? He asked his rabbi. He didn't go Batman on him, okay? He didn't grab his spear and went for it. He said, Moshe, didn't you teach that if a person does this, Kanaim Pugimbo, that a vengeful person can go ahead and exact the din? And he said, yes. And at that time, so he went, and all the miracles happened, and whatever happened. At that time, see, because that time was the fixing of Nadav and Avihu, because here he asked. And even though it was like this outlandish act that he did, but still, what happened here eventually comes out and becomes rectified into Pinchas, who becomes Elijah, who's able to control the winds. In other words, he's able to ride up in a chariot of horses, even though there's a storm rage around him. He knows how to handle the winds. The issue is here, us, okay, to be connected, okay? The whole goal of the Torah, right, is for us to be totally connected to God. And we have to know how to inspire ourselves. But you have to know when you get too inspired, you got to cool off. And the way to do that, get yourself a teacher. You got to have a teacher that, even though you might be smarter than that teacher, the way that the situation, the creation is made is there's a teacher, and then there's a student. And then eventually you can become a teacher, right? But the idea here is to always stay connected, right? No matter what, okay? The whole goal is to attach yourself to God, and we need to do that. We need advice. We need to go to people for advice, right? All the time. And the best way to get that is to go to the Holy Tzaddikim. So anyways, in the end of this week's Parsha, so that's basically, interestingly enough, so you have the 8th day, which we thought was going to be the unbelievable day, where the Shekhinah, one good day, and we couldn't even have one good day. But the unbelievable lesson comes out, right? That we always have to stay connected. And even it's through the tzaddikim and through the advice of the tzaddikim. The rest of the parsha deals with actually something quite interesting, just on a different note. Deals with the laws of kashrut. One has to know, and never get it through your mind, that in the laws of kashrut, there is no reasoning behind it. Okay? All of the animals that we can eat and the animals that we cannot eat, even though that you might hear reasons behind it, and it does make sense, and a lot of things do make sense. Bottom line, we don't have a reason for why we eat kosher. Okay, but all I know is, I heard someone explain about the pig, which was quite an interesting thing. You know, how fast it digests the food that it eats, which the food that it eats isn't the best food, right? And it goes right into the meat. So if a person eats that kind of food, it certainly makes sense, but we never know the reasons behind the things that we eat. Okay? With that, any questions?